Suppressing your emotions at work doesn't make you strong. It makes you silent. And silence comes with a cost. It costs innovation, it costs morale, and for too many of us, it's costing mental health. So in this video, I'm breaking down exactly how emotional suppression is sabotaging your workplace and what to do instead to unlock resilience, performance, and trust. Let's get it. So I've worked in and around corporate culture for years, and I understand that for many of them, they treat emotional suppression almost like competence, right? If you're not showing a lot of big emotions, especially the ones that are more negatively perceived, then you're seen to be stoic, right? You're the most rational, and it's almost rewarded. And so we have this understanding, this kind of thing that's unspoken, that you're not supposed to cry, you're not supposed to express these more negatively perceived emotions when you're at work. And so what that does is it makes us feel that we need to suppress those emotions. This reminds me of work that we're doing with a leading company in the building materials industry. We did our Change Growth Scorecard with that organization, which is an assessment to understand their emotional agility, to understand their emotional culture. And one of the questions that we asked is, do you feel comfortable or do you often share your emotions amongst your team? And that was a solid result. 75% of the respondents said yes, we talk about our feelings with our teams. But then we asked the question, do you often conceal emotions at work? That was about 60%. And then we asked another one, which was, I don't feel comfortable sharing more negative emotions at work. That was 50-50. 50% of the respondents don't feel comfortable sharing those more difficult emotions like your frustration, like your anger, like your fear, like your anxiety, and likely are concealing those emotions. And so it's important that we embrace the full spectrum of emotion, even at work, because they don't slow things down. They actually are trying to inform us to understand where there's opportunity to better connect, to grow, and to learn. And there's also a tax that happens on employees that feel they need to be hiding or suppressing their emotions. And that actually lives in the body, right? And it can manifest in many different ways, stress-related, and our physiology begins to change. But then there's also that pressure where I have to be perfect from an emotional standpoint in order to get ahead in this business. And I will tell you, as a Black queer woman, that's certainly something that I have felt before, that I have to be perfect. I certainly can't show up as angry because it's going to have bad marks on me and I won't be able to get advanced. And so it's important that we have that realization that there are those in the workforce, those in our teams, those in marginalized populations who might feel like I have to be emotionally perfect in order to show up and in order to get promoted within this organization. The reality is that is having a tax on those individuals. And I guarantee you, they will be one of the ones that will eventually attrit out. We are all human beings and we carry our emotions. Because the truth is, when you're taught to suppress, when there's an underlying understanding that you need to suppress more difficult emotions, you don't ultimately become a high performer. You become a pressure cooker. And you're sure to unleash that energy on someone who doesn't deserve it, or you're going to hold it in and it will manifest in ways that I assure you, you will not want. Now I want to talk about the invisible cost that's incurred to businesses when there's this underlying understanding or this culture where emotions should be suppressed and that emotional tax is being taken hold of individuals in the organization. The cost to the business, which I just alluded to, is attrition. You're going to have decreased employee engagement, and ultimately the culture is not going to be nearly as vibrant. And though you might think allowing those emotions to be suppressed, you're going to move faster, ultimately it's going to stall your initiatives and stall your endeavors, or you're going to end up falling into pitfalls, making mistakes, having to redo the work because individuals don't feel safe and comfortable speaking up and speaking out. This reminds me of an initiative that I was doing in the consumer packaged goods industry. We were launching a new product to market, and it was on a really accelerated timeline. And we had a trial that we were set to run, and we initially had, let's call it 8 weeks to plan for that trial. Well, the executive leaders then came to us and said, we need to run this trial in 4 weeks instead of 8. And everyone, this is on a call, we heard it on a call, and we're sitting amongst ourselves in a conference room, and we're all looking at each other with these faces like, what? Shock, denial, and a lot of fear and angst. I wasn't the most senior person sitting at that table, but I could feel the emotions of the team. And I knew that it was on me to actually speak up and say, you know what? I sense this angst in the room. And I think the reason that we feel it is because we have done all the planning that we know 8 weeks is what we need in order to be successful. And so we can do it in 4 weeks, but this is what you're risking. And so I took it upon myself to kind of speak to that angst, speak to that fear and that frustration, and help senior leaderships understand this is what you're risking if we're going to truncate or shorten the timeline. And so it can be so powerful when you work in a culture where employees feel that they can actually express their emotion in productive ways and not just hold it in. Had I not said a word, had no one in that room said a word, and we just go in our own downward spiral, this is terrible, this is dumb, I can't believe they're doing this, then the trial would have been a failure. Now we ended up having a compromise and we did it in 6 weeks versus 4 or 8. So now let's talk about the really real. How do you do this? You're sitting here watching this thinking, okay, Cassandra's telling me that I need to help normalize feeling all the feels, not just the excitement and the enthusiasm. How do I help my team? How do I help nurture that across the culture? So let's get tactical on how we can actually use emotional expression as a business strategy and as a tactic to move things forward. Well, there's some very quick, easy things that you can do and start role modeling with your team. One of the small practices, and this is something that you yourself can do, is to start modeling what emotional sharing looks like, right? When you state the fact, I'm feeling a bit frustrated, all you're doing is naming the emotion. Now, I always like to state it objectively and then let people know, here's what I'm gonna choose in this moment. I'm actually gonna go take a beat. Let me have about 10 or 15 minutes so I can process this and really understand what it's trying to inform me of, and then I'll come back into the conversation. That's step one, making sure that there is safety in naming an emotion that exists in a body or in a room. So that's an easy way that you can actually start role modeling this, especially if you're a leader and you have responsibility over your team. Another tactic that you could start role modeling yourself is actually showing appreciation and gratitude when you hear those more difficult emotions being shared. When you hear someone state, I'm feeling angry, I'm feeling fearful, I'm feeling anxious, thank them. Thank you so much for sharing your current emotional state so honestly with me. I know that it's a difficult time, but it's really gonna help me to support you knowing that this is kind of what your emotional signature is right now. So show appreciation. The more that you can appreciate when employees are doing this, they're gonna see, oh, okay, I don't get in trouble. It's not a bad thing that I'm sharing these real emotions. So share that gratitude and appreciation. The other tactic I'd offer is the power of curiosity and really getting curious, especially when you can sense that there's emotions in the room that aren't been given or haven't been given voice. Get curious. Ask the question, how are you all feeling? And I want you to be really honest and candid with me. And if you can tell that they're just telling you what they think you want to hear, keep in that curiosity. Ask more questions. Well, is there anything that's giving you any irritation? Is there anything that's making you feel any type of anxiousness or fear? Because I want to hear about that too. Open the door so that they can then share it. Right? Welcome that into the conversation. The other thing that I'd offer, and this is for you who's sitting there, knowing that you want to express your own emotions and you want to invite others into their emotional expression as opposed to suppression, but you sense that your culture, the macrocosm of the culture, is not one that invites emotional expression. It actually advances emotional suppression. There's power in the story of success. So as you're working this in yourself, as you're working this with your team, be able to find spotlights, highlights where you had an individual that expressed, that named their emotion, that then took you to a place of opportunity where there was a connection to be nurtured, where there was an opportunity, like, for me in an upcoming trial, that you were able to actually understand because they shared that emotion. Share that then out with your executive team, with the rest of the culture. The more that you can start seeing these lights of success, people are gonna get hold of it, right? Because I guarantee you that emotional suppression that lives in the macrocosm of your culture, it's because that's what they think is the right way in order to move results forward. But if you can prove otherwise with strong stories of success, you can start slowly beginning to shift minds. And it is gonna take time, but I just invite you to do that. And I'll leave you with this. This whole idea is not about creating a therapy session in your workplace. This is about emotional expression in a very productive way. Because the reality is high-performing teams still feel. Wait, before you go, I've got something completely for free. There's a link below for you to download a chapter from my best-selling book, Change Enthusiasm: How to Harness the Power of Emotion for Leadership and Success. Grab your free chapter, start diving in, and understand the true power of leveraging emotion and emotional expression to move you and your team forward, especially when going through constant change. I'm Cassandra Worthy, and until we meet again, keep rocking.